Have you ever looked at an old photograph and felt that someone or something was watching you from the past? Perhaps it was a smile that didn't quite belong, or eyes that seemed too knowing, too cold. Imagine discovering a century-old wedding portrait seemingly joyful at first glance, yet hiding a darkness no one in the family dared to speak of. This is exactly what happened to Sarah Matthews, an experienced appraiser in Chicago, when an elderly woman brought her a photograph from 1912. A bride glowing with happiness, a groom with a smile that made even the most seasoned professional pause. Beneath the lace and finery of a perfect Boston wedding, subtle details hinted at something far more sinister. Over the course of her investigation, Sarah uncovered hidden letters, secret journals, and police files that revealed a chilling story of obsession murder and extraordinary courage. The bride's quiet heroism would forever change the fate of those around her and leave a photograph that captured the moment evil and bravery first met. Where are you watching from tonight as we unravel this dark tale together? Sarah Matthews had spent 15 years appraising antique photographs, yet the wedding portrait brought to her small Chicago studio on a grey October morning made her pause in a way nothing had before. The elderly woman who carried it, Mrs. Eleanor Whitfield, held the photograph as if it were a sacred relic, placing it carefully on Sarah's examination table. "This belonged to my great-grandmother," Eleanor said, her voice trembling ever so slightly. "I found it in the attic when settling her estate. Her family had always whispered about this photograph, but no one ever explained why." Sarah leaned over the sepia-toned image magnifying glass in hand and examined every detail. At first glance, it appeared to be an ordinary wedding portrait from 1912. A radiant bride in an intricate lace gown, standing beside her groom in a formal black suit. The bride's expression was one of pure joy, her eyes shimmering even through the faded tones of a century-old print. Behind them, wedding guests and family members were arranged carefully dressed in their finest attire of the era. The room, an ornate parlor with heavy drapery and patterned wallpaper, was captured in meticulous detail. The composition suggested the hand of a skilled photographer, not an amateur. But as Sarah adjusted her magnification, focusing on the groom's face, a chill ran down her spine. While everyone else radiated the happiness of a wedding day, the groom's smile was different. It was not the nervous excitement of a man newlywed, nor the satisfied expression of someone beginning a life with his bride. There was something else entirely lurking behind that smile, something that made Sarah's practiced eye hesitate. "Mrs. Whitfield, what exactly did your family whisper about this photograph?" Sarah asked softly, still examining the image. Eleanor shifted in her chair, unease shadowing her face. "They said there was something wrong with it, something that shouldn't be there." For the next hour, Sarah studied the photograph with meticulous care. The photographer's mark in the lower right corner read, J. Morrison Studios, Boston, Massachusetts. The paper and chemical processing matched techniques from 1912. Everything about the image screamed authenticity, except for that unsettling expression. Under higher magnification, the groom's face became even more disturbing. While his mouth curved in what should have been a joyful smile, his eyes were cold, piercing through decades as if they carried a secret meant to be hidden. More troubling still, something was clutched in his left hand, partially hidden by his formal pose, but unmistakable to Sarah's trained eye. "Have you researched your family history?" From around this time, Sarah asked Eleanor, who watched anxiously. Some Eleanor replied. The bride was my great-grandmother Catherine Morrison. She married Thomas Ashford in Boston in September 1912. Both came from prominent families. She was the daughter of a successful merchant, he from old New England money. Sarah took careful notes as Eleanor spoke. And what happened to them after the wedding? Eleanor's face clouded. That's where the family stories get strange. According to the records I found, Thomas died just 3 months after their wedding. Some kind of accident. But Catherine never remarried. She never spoke of him again. She left Boston entirely starting over, as if erasing that chapter of her life. A shiver ran down Sarah's spine. She looked again at the object in Thomas's hand. Now she was certain it wasn't a typical wedding accessory. Its shape was too angular, deliberate, almost purposeful. She adjusted her magnification to get the clearest view. Mrs. Whitfield, I think we need to dig deeper into this photograph. Would you allow me to do some research? I have contacts at historical societies and photography archives who might help us understand what we're really looking at. Eleanor's eyes lit up eager. Please, I've carried this mystery my whole life. My family always acted as though there were a terrible secret connected to this photograph, but no one ever dared to tell me what it was. 2 days later, Sarah found herself on a train to Boston, the city where Catherine and Thomas's story had begun, and where the photograph's dark enigma might finally start to reveal itself. But what would she truly uncover, and could any photograph carry the weight of a century-old secret? The photograph, now carefully secured in her research portfolio, seemed to pulse with quiet secrets as Sarah stepped off the train. Her first stop was the Boston Historical Society, a grand building filled with the hushed weight of centuries, where she hoped to uncover records of the Morrison and Ashford families from 1912. The archive librarian, Dr. James Kellerton, a thin man with wire-rimmed glasses and the air of someone who had spent a lifetime listening to old ghosts of Boston society, raised an eyebrow when Sarah showed him the photograph. "Dear God," he whispered, leaning closer. "I've heard of this photograph, but I never thought I'd actually see it." Sarah's pulse quickened. "You know about this picture?" Dr. Kellerton nodded grimly. The Ashford family tried to destroy every copy after Thomas's death. They claimed it was cursed, that something malevolent had been captured in the image. Most dismissed it as grief and superstition, yet whispers among older archivists persisted for decades. He led her to a private research room, pulling several thick volumes of Boston Society records from 1912. The Ashfords were among Boston's most prominent families, he explained, flipping through genealogical pages filled with meticulous script. Old money established in shipping and banking. Thomas was the only son heir to a considerable fortune. Sarah absorbed the family records as Dr. Kellerton continued. The Morrisons were newer money. Catherine's father built a successful import business. Their marriage was celebrated as the perfect union of tradition and ambition. But something went wrong. Very wrong. He paused, darkening in expression. Thomas died in December 1912, as you mentioned, but the circumstances were unusual. Officially, an accidental fall down the mansion stairs. Yet even then, there were whispers, murmurs of something far more sinister. He handed Sarah a newspaper clipping, dated December 15th, 1912. The headline read, Young Ashford aired IS in tragic accident. Sarah studied the article, sensing subtle inconsistencies in witness accounts, strange omissions, and details that didn't quite add up. Dr. Kellerton, in your professional opinion, what truly happened to Thomas Ashford? Sarah asked softly. The librarian leaned back, as if weighing the centuries of silence. Sarah, what I am about to show you has been kept in our restricted archives for over a century. The Ashfords donated these materials with instructions that they remain sealed until all immediate family members had passed. He vanished into the depths of the archives, returning moments later, with a dusty box marked Ashford Estate Restricted Access. Inside were police reports, personal correspondence, and most chilling of all, additional photographs from the wedding day itself. The Boston police investigated more thoroughly than the newspapers suggested, Dr. Kellerton said, carefully laying out the documents. They suspected Thomas's death wasn't accidental, but could never prove it. The family's influence was considerable, and the inquiry quietly closed. Sarah's eyes scanned the police photographs, growing more alarmed. They depicted the grand staircase of the Ashford mansion, chalk outlines and evidence markers still visible. But it was the witness statements that unsettled her most. "Look at this," Dr. Kellerton murmured, pointing to the family butler's report. Thomas's behavior in the weeks before his death had grown erratic, frightening even. The cook noted he spoke to himself, laughed inappropriately at odd hours. Pieces of a dark puzzle began to coalesce in Sarah's mind. She glanced again at the wedding photograph, Thomas's unsettling smile, now seeming to harbor a hidden meaning. "Dr. Kellerton, is there any mention of mental illness in the Ashford family history?" "Not officially," he said. Hesitating, then produced a leather-bound journal. This belonged to Catherine Morrison Ashford. She left it to the Historical Society in her will, with instructions that it be opened 50 years after her death, 25 years ago. The journal's pages were yellowed and delicate, yet Catherine's handwriting remained clear and precise. Sarah began reading the words from late 1912, chilling her to the bone. September 30th, 1912. Thomas's behavior has changed dramatically since our wedding day. Even reading those first lines, Sarah felt a cold certainty creeping through her. What had Thomas truly become in those fleeting months after the vows, and what secret had that photograph preserved for over a century, waiting for someone to notice? "The man I married seems to have disappeared," Catherine had written, "replaced by someone I no longer recognize. His smile terrifies me. It's the same expression he wore in our wedding photograph, and I fear I know what it means." October 15th, 1912. I found the letters hidden in Thomas's study. God forgive me. I know the truth about my husband, and I fear for my life. Dr. Kellerton's hands trembled slightly as he lifted a small bundle of letters from the bottom of the archive box. "These," he whispered, "are what Catherine mentioned in her journal. They were discovered among Thomas's effects after his death." Sarah carefully unfolded the first letter, dated September 1912, just weeks before the wedding. The handwriting was unmistakably different from Thomas's usual signature, more erratic, every stroke pressed too hard into the page, as though driven by obsession. "My dearest Catherine," it began, "you looked so beautiful today during our engagement portrait. I can hardly wait to make you mine forever. You have no idea what I am capable of, what I have already done to ensure our happiness. The Morrison girl who rejected me last spring learned not to cross Thomas Ashford. They never did find her body in the harbor. Sarah's hands trembled. The paper seemed to hum faintly in her grasp. Dr. Kellerton watched her closely. "There's more," he said, quietly. The second letter was worse, detailing Thomas's twisted plans for their wedding night and the days to follow. He didn't speak of love or devotion, but of possession. His tone was one of ownership, dominance, control. Within his words were veiled threats, dark promises of what would happen if Catherine ever disobeyed. But it was the third letter that made Sarah finally understand the horror frozen inside the photograph she had first examined in Chicago. It was dated the morning of the wedding. "Today I marry my prize." I wore my special smile for the photographer, the same smile I gave to Mary Harrison before she took her final swim. The same smile I gave to the Mitchell boy before his tragic riding accident. Catherine will learn to obey, or she will learn what that smile truly means. The photographer captured my moment of triumph perfectly. The room seemed to grow colder as Sarah finished reading. Dr. Kellerton retrieved additional files, police documents, long hidden from public view. After Thomas's death, he said gravely, investigators uncovered evidence connecting him to 3 unsolved deaths in the Boston area between 1910 and 1912. Mary Harrison, the Morrison girl mentioned in the letters, had indeed been found drowned in Boston Harbor that April. Jonathan Mitchell, a young man, once close to Catherine, had perished in a suspicious riding accident. Sarah turned back to the wedding photograph, her breath shallow. Thomas's smile wasn't one of love or nervous joy. It was the cold, satisfied grin of a predator who believed he had finally trapped his prey. And the object in his left hand, now that she knew what to look for, was not part of a bouquet at all. Beneath the flowers, the outline of a small blade was unmistakable. "Dr. Kellerton," Sarah's voice was barely above a whisper. "How did Catherine survive? How did she escape him?" The librarian's expression grew solemn. "That, my dear, is where this story takes its most remarkable turn." He opened the journal again, its brittle pages sighing under the weight of time, and pointed to the entries from November 1912, just weeks before Thomas's death. Sarah read aloud, her voice soft and reverent. "November 8th, 1912. I have searched through Thomas's belongings while he is away at his club. The letters I found confirm unspeakable crimes. I now understand I married a monster who has killed at least 3 people, but I also understand I may be the only person who can stop him. November 15th, 1912. I have contacted Detective Morrison, no relation to me privately. He confirmed my worst fears. Thomas is suspected in several deaths, but there has never been enough evidence. I have decided what I must do. Thomas believes he holds all the power in this marriage, but he has underestimated the daughter of a Boston merchant. November 22nd, 1912. Thomas's behavior grows more erratic each day. Last night he showed me his collection souvenirs from his victims. He is planning something terrible for me, I am certain. But I have been planning as well. The detective has agreed to help. We have devised a plan." Sarah looked up from the journal, her heart racing. She was working with the police. Dr. Kellerton nodded. Detective Patrick Morrison was one of Boston's most respected investigators. He had been tracking the pattern of deaths for months, but could never gather the proof he needed. When Catherine came forward, He finally had a chance to stop him. Sarah ran her fingertips across Catherine's words, almost feeling the woman's fear pressed into the paper. Somewhere between the lines, the bride had stopped being a victim and started becoming something else entirely. But how far had she been willing to go? And what exactly happened inside that house before Thomas Ashford fell to his death? The next journal entry revealed the meticulous plan Catherine had crafted. November 30th, 1912. Tomorrow evening, Thomas has arranged what he calls a special dinner for us. Based on his behavior and the things he has said, I believe he intends to kill me that night. Detective Morrison will be positioned outside the house. We have arranged signals. If Thomas attempts to harm me, I will light the lamp in the front window and the detective will enter with backup officers. Sarah felt the tension tighten around her chest as she turned the fragile pages. December 1st, 1912. It is done. Thomas revealed his true nature tonight, just as we predicted. He showed me the knife he intended to use, the same one he carried hidden in our wedding bouquet. But when he moved to attack me, I was ready. The struggle was brief. He fell down the stairs, but it was no accident. I pushed him to save my own life and the lives of any future victims. A chill ran down Sarah's spine. Catherine had acted in self-defense, but more than that, she had saved countless others. Dr. Kellerton nodded as if sharing the weight of that grim realization. Police investigations later confirmed that Thomas had been plotting to murder several other young women in Boston society. Catherine's courage had prevented a serial killer from claiming more lives. Dr. Kellerton turned to the final section of police documents, revealing the labyrinthine web of decisions made after Thomas's death. Detective Morrison faced a difficult choice. Catherine had clearly acted in self-defense, but proving Thomas's crimes after his death would have been nearly impossible in 1912. The Ashford family's wealth and influence made a public trial unthinkable. Sarah leaned closer, absorbing the gravity of what she read. So, they covered it up. They protected Catherine while quietly ensuring that justice was preserved. Detective Morrison and his superiors, Dr. Kellerton, decided that evidence of Thomas's crimes would be sealed in the police archives, but the official cause of death would remain accidental. This way, Catherine could begin a new life without the scandal of a murder trial, while the truth about Thomas's crimes endured in secret for history to eventually uncover. The files revealed astonishing details of Thomas's activities. Hidden rooms in the Ashford mansion contained personal items stolen from his victims, meticulous plans for future murders, and journals describing his crimes in horrifying detail. The most chilling discovery, Dr. Kellerton continued, was Thomas's own confession he had been planning Catherine's murder from before their engagement. He had treated their courtship, their wedding, and even the honeymoon as part of an elaborate game, with her death as the ultimate prize. Sarah's gaze returned to the wedding photograph. Now she understood the full context of that predatory smile. The smile Thomas had worn frozen forever on film had not been one of joy, but of sinister triumph. According to his journal, he had reveled in the irony of smiling for the photographer while holding the very weapon he intended to use to kill his bride. Dr. Kellerton produced one final document from the archives, a letter from Catherine to Detective Morrison, written years later. Even after relocating to California and remarrying, she never forgot the debt she owed to the detective who had helped her escape. The letter dated 1925 read, in part, Detective Morrison. I write to thank you once again for giving me the chance at a new life. Not a day passes that I do not think of that terrible night in December 1912. But I also remember that we prevented a monster from claiming more innocent lives. The photograph from my wedding day serves as a reminder that evil can hide behind the most innocent facades, but it also reminds me that courage and justice can triumph over even the darkest intentions. Dr. Kellerton's eyes twinkled faintly as he reached into the archive box one last time. From the depths of the dusty papers, he produced a sealed envelope marked J. Morrison Studios, personal account. Sarah leaned forward, sensing that even after a century, the photograph and the documents still held secrets yet to be revealed. The photographer who had captured the wedding portrait had left behind a personal account among his business records, discovered only when his studio was sold in 1945. He had been haunted by that single session for the rest of his life. Sarah opened the envelope, carefully revealing a handwritten account by Jonathan Morrison. No relation to Detective Morrison or the bride. Dated 1913, it described his experience photographing the Ashford wedding. I have been a wedding photographer for over 20 years, and I have never witnessed anything like the Ashford session. While arranging the formal portraits, I noticed the groom's behavior was deeply unsettling. He insisted on holding a small object during the photographs, claiming it was a family heirloom, but he concealed it so carefully that I began to suspect something was terribly wrong. Morrison continued describing the groom's smile. In all my years, I have learned to recognize joy, nervous happiness, even forced politeness. But Mr. Ashford's smile was unlike anything I had ever seen. Predatory, almost sinister. I felt compelled to capture it, though I could not explain why at the time. When I developed the photographs, I was so disturbed that I almost destroyed the print. Something in his expression seemed to threaten not just his bride, but anyone who looked upon the photograph. Sarah read on, fascinated by the technical details. Morrison described how Thomas had positioned himself in the portrait to display his hidden object just enough for careful observation, ensuring it was partially visible beneath his bouquet. Most remarkable was the photographer's final note. In my professional opinion, Mr. Ashford posed for this portrait, knowing it would be his last photograph. He smiled for the camera as though savoring a victory that had not yet occurred. After learning the truth about his character following his death, I realized I had captured the face of evil itself. Dr. Kellerton regarded Sarah gravely. The photographer's account confirms what we learned from other sources. Thomas Ashford used his wedding day as a setup for what he believed would be the perfect murder. Before Sarah left Boston, Dr. Kellerton provided one last piece of the puzzle, a folder marked Morrison Investigation. Final Report, 1913. Detective Morrison had submitted it to his superiors a year after Thomas's death. Classified for decades, it revealed the full scope of Thomas's crimes. The report showed evidence linking Thomas to 7 suspicious deaths between 1910 and 1912, far more than the 3 mentioned earlier. Catherine had unwittingly stepped into a trap, but with her courage and planning, she had survived. The files detailed Thomas's methods, elaborate courtship or friendship, followed by carefully staged accidents, all designed to appear natural. Among the evidence in his private study were detailed plans to murder Catherine. On December 3, 1912, the day after the wedding photograph had been taken, The report described the night of Thomas's death clinically. Catherine lit the lamp. Detective Morrison entered with backup officers, and when Thomas attacked with the knife from his wedding bouquet, she defended herself. He fell down the stairs. The officers determined she acted in clear self-defense. Yet, because of the Ashford family's immense social power, the death was officially ruled accidental, while evidence of his crimes was preserved in secret for historical record. Sarah's eyes lingered on the detective's final observation. The wedding photograph was the most chilling evidence of Thomas's criminal mind. His expression and posture confirmed he had posed deliberately while planning his bride's murder. The image stood as a testament to the evil that could hide behind society's most sacred ceremonies. Dr. Kellerton closed the file. Detective Morrison passed in 1945, but his son donated his father's papers in 1970. Among them was a letter addressed to whoever discovers this case in the future. Sarah read the final words aloud. Her voice hushed. Catherine Ashford was one of the bravest women I have ever encountered. She risked her life to stop a killer and save others. The photograph that started this investigation captures a moment of evil, but her courage transformed it into evidence of justice. I hope that someday her heroism will be recognized. Sarah returned to Chicago armed with the complete story. When she met Eleanor Whitfield, she carefully recounted every detail from Thomas's crimes to Catherine's courageous actions. Your great-great-grandmother wasn't just a survivor, Sarah said gently. She was a hero who saved countless lives. That photograph, as disturbing as it is, represents the moment she unknowingly posed with a monster, but also the beginning of her journey toward justice. Eleanor wept as she listened, finally understanding the whispers that had haunted her family for generations. It had never been shame or scandal. They had sensed something darker, something evil, frozen in that predatory smile. Now Catherine's story could be told, transforming a hidden burden into a legacy of courage. Sarah had prepared a full dossier for Eleanor, copies of all historical documents, police reports, and Detective Morrison's final investigation. The Boston Historical Society planned a small exhibition on unsolved crimes of the early 1900s and wanted to include Catherine's story. Eleanor agreed immediately. She deserves to be remembered for her courage, she said. Together, they examined the photograph one last time. Sarah pointed out the subtle details, the knife hidden in the bouquet, Thomas's predatory smile, his poised posture. But alongside them, they saw Catherine's strength, her determination even before she realized what she would have to do. It's amazing how much history a single photograph can hold, Eleanor whispered. Sarah smiled softly. That's the magic of my work. Every image tells a story, but some stories are more important than others. Your great-great-grandmother's courage saved lives and brought justice. That wedding portrait may have captured a moment of evil, but it ultimately became evidence of good triumphing over darkness. 6 months later, Eleanor attended the opening of the Boston Historical Society's exhibition, Hidden Crimes, Forgotten Heroes, Justice in Early 20th Century Boston. Catherine Morrison. Ashford's story was featured prominently. The wedding photograph displayed alongside Detective Morrison's case files and Catherine's journal entries. The exhibit description read, "This 1912 wedding portrait appears to show a joyful celebration, but careful examination reveals a darker truth. The groom's smile conceals the mind of a serial killer, while the bride's courage would ultimately bring justice and save innocent lives. This photograph serves as a reminder that evil can hide behind the most innocent facades, but ordinary people can find extraordinary strength when facing unimaginable evil. Eleanor stood silently before the display, finally understanding the whispers that had lingered in her family for generations. It had never been shame, they had simply sensed the hidden evil captured in that predatory smile. But now, Catherine's true story could be told, turning a family secret into a legacy of courage and justice.